Good evening and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, reality our realm, said as we see it and frankly as well.
2,000 but it's the next iteration of an existing system.
But it's a design, it's not manufacturing anything.
I think there should be, there are restrictions. You have to be licensed to carry a weapon.
Addiction, and I think that if we took a more compassionate approach, we might find more of a solution.
Radical swing of the pendulum. Now we're, it's more liberal, more progressive, more.
It's time for us to honor those folks who, send comments to it.
Good evening, I'm Joe Spina and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, reality our realm, said as we see it and frankly as well, and at times we have myths to dispel. Tonight may be one of them. Mr. Paul Crowley, how are you?
Very good, Joe. Feeling a little under the weather today.
Under the weather?
Under the weather.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to hear me?
I can.
You got your ears all blocked up?
All plugged up,
Yep.
But that does not deter me.
Remember that, so for you folks at home, I'm curious how many people you have ever heard this expression?
Yeah.
Deaf as a haddock?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a decidedly Lynn line?
Are you calling me a fish? Is that what you're trying to say?
I never knew
I
haddock
don't want to
was
sleep
deaf.
with the fish, I'll tell you that right now. That's
Did
not
you
a good
ever hear that expression before?
I have.
Yeah. It's decidedly Lynn, I think, or at least.
Did you ever hear of the fact that the city of Lynn has a shortfall?
Of haddock?
A significant shortfall?
Of haddock?
Not of haddock. They have a shortfall of what they call
Greenbacks.
greenbacks.
All right, so now you want to start talking about some serious things.
Because it is a critical issue. Last
Yeah.
week, after we did our show,
Yeah.
of course we're on the cutting edge, they voted not to vote on putting the 2.5 override on the ballot.
They voted not to vote?
In other words, they didn't vote. They gathered to vote, but they didn't vote.
Right.
Because they didn't want their name associated with, excuse me, putting the name on the ballot. I mean, putting 2.5 on the ballot. Which, by the way, is just a shell game to start with.
Right, yep.
Okay, so let's go options. Options. Now,
Let's talk about options, okay.
right. First of all, the school department is $7.5 million in the dink, right?
Yeah.
Coming up short.
Deficit spending of $7.5 million. And by the way, if they don't come up with the money to meet their spending obligations, what do they call it? What's that?
Fiduciary.
Well, no, they have a
benchmark.
maintenance of effort, they call it. If they don't meet the maintenance of effort, the state has threatened to pull back even more money. Hold back.
That's not very nice, Paul.
I always found that to be very, very odd. If you don't have enough money, we're going to take the rest of it away from you.
Well, let's.
So you don't have any money for education.
Well, let's talk about the viability of a city like Lynn, and it's on the cusp of being non-viable. The revenue source is just not there. Now, you can only raise taxes to a certain point before you're going to drive the taxpayers out of the city, which leaves you with a shell, a la Detroit, Michigan.
Yeah.
Okay, it's that simple.
Thousands and thousands of homes that are empty.
Exactly.
They have at least 10,000 empty homes in Detroit. Imagine that? That just doesn't,
Yeah, I can imagine that, Paul. If you have bad policies,
Yep.
you end up with bad results.
Right.
Now, we have to have some imaginative people, and we'll get into this during the show. Folks, we don't pull any punches here.
No.
It's that simple. So, on top of it, the school department wants to spend about $70 million to build 2 schools, which, to me, I'm not so sure I like that investment, because schools don't derive any revenue, Paul.
Sure.
You're taking land out of the taxable area, aren't you?
Yeah. If you build it on already non-income generating land, it's not. Right.
Right.
They're talking about off of Parkland Ave. There's not getting any taxes there. Hopefully that won't happen. I don't think that the neighbors want that.
But what, Paul,
But
go ahead.
same thing for the one over at McManus Field. If they do it there, it's going to be on land that's not currently on the tax rolls.
But what about if someone thought big, which we'll get into that. Let's just go down the mechanics right now, and then let's go off into wondering and pondering some big ideas.
Okay,
It's
so
what the city has to go for.
on the mechanics, you said the city is contemplating spending $70 million to build 2 schools.
Exactly.
Is that the city's portion? Because I remember they talked about spending the total cost of Marshall School was going to be about 65 million.
No,
And it ended up being 90.
Right, but it was only supposed to be 20%,
Right.
which means 18.
But they leave out all that stuff that doesn't get
So
included.
it ended up being about 50, our cost.
Right,
I
so-
don't know. This is what bothers me.
So you're saying the 70 million, though, is our cost associated with building?
I have no idea. Whatever figures they throw out
It's
there,
certainly
I
not
have
enough
no-
to build 2 schools in
Paul,
total.
I don't trust the figures, Paul.
Neither do I.
I've been burnt enough times to realize that those figures are fictitious.
Right.
All right. So, we know the police received a 3% pay increase over the next 4 years.
Yep.
We know that the 739 firefighters,
Yep.
they're on the doorstep, right?
Right.
To come in with their little raise, soon to be followed by the DPW and city workers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, everybody wants green stuff. The reservoir is empty. Now, the first option was to do what, Paul? To override 2.5, which, in their great coverage, they never touched that issue. They just said, oh no. In fact, the mayor said, no, I'm not going to override 2.5, right? Last week, thinking about it, this week, forget it. So option 1, I love 2.5. They love 2.5 now. No override, folks. It means nothing. It's just a shell game. Option 2, otherwise known as cuts. Pardon me. Now, last week, we mentioned cuts. Somehow this week, they took cuts and made them into 2 different categories. You ever hear this one, Paul? Cuts in services, cuts in personnel.
Right.
They made a distinction.
Right. And I would think that any cuts to personnel would be a cut in service, don't you?
You're brilliant. You are brilliant,
Not
Paul.
brilliant.
See, the simplicity of your brilliance is astounding. Folks, I wish that our
now I'm
politicians,
simple-minded.
and they didn't re-elect this guy. Can you imagine that? You know why? Because he speaks truth. Simplicity, K-A-S-S. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
I wish someone would learn that.
Yeah.
Okay, so, do you honestly think that anybody has the appetite to cut either or?
Services or staff?
Yeah. That gonna happen, Paul?
Not without them being absolutely out of options. That's
But-
like the last resort.
But here at Frankly Speaking, pondering all of the alternatives, we ginned up the truth.
Look, we talked about this yesterday, and this is not a we, this was a you. Absolutely brought this point up. It took you 10 minutes to get it through this simple thought process that you
Stop,
talk about.
don't.
But let me tell you,
Yeah.
your idea, what you came up with is remarkable, and basically what Joe was saying is that there's no need for a 2.5 override, basically because property values are up, what,
Exactly.
28% over the past 2 years, which allows, in essence, the city to raise
built-in
taxes.
tax increase.
You can raise taxes no more than 2.5%
Exactly.
of the total value of the
Do you know anybody that's going to feel bad about being told that their house is now worth $50,000 more than it was 2 years ago?
They're not going to feel bad about that, but when you incorporate that with an increase in taxes,
But it blunts the pain.
right?
Okay? So, but most people pay their taxes in escrow, and it's part of their mortgage.
Right.
So their tax increase, we'll say of 10%, is going to be $30 a month, which is not going to kill. Someone like me that pays quarterly, and I see instead of it being $1,200, it's now $1,400. I don't like that idea.
But you make an interesting point. It's the observation of the taxpayer. There's that top line, like the headline in the story, right? What is the item going to say when they make the announcement that they're raising that they had to increase taxes to get another $10 million into the coffers,
They
right?
don't have to raise taxes. They don't have to do it. The value.
But they do no. But here's what they'll do. They will increase the amount of taxes that they receive, raise taxes, by lowering the tax rate.
Yes, because
And
they
they're-
make you think they lowered the tax rate, but the revenue.
But
the
they
issue is the revenue.
They absolutely lower the tax rate. But so let's just play a little game here. So if you got $100,000,
Right.
and the tax rate is 8%, it's $8,000, right?
Exactly.
So if all of a sudden now the value is $128,000,
Yeah.
so you increase it by 28%, and the tax rate goes down to 6%.
But they're still
You're
getting more revenue.
paying more even though your rate went down.
Exactly. It's a shell game. Now, Paul, do you recall, I remember you pining about 2008 when the whole economy, real estate market collapsed. And
Yep.
it did. You couldn't sell a house in the city of Lynn if you wanted to.
Right.
Did your taxes go down?
No, they
Remain the
lowered,
same.
they lowered the value and raised the rate.
Exactly.
Right.
So
In
you
fact, they went up.
right, because it should have been the fact that they go down because it should float with the market.
Actually,
but it doesn't.
the commercial tax base got clobbered because the residential valuations went down so much that the tax burden shifted over to the commercial base.
Which is counterproductive, Paul, because if you overtax commercial, you kill the goose that lays the golden eggs.
Right. Even though the city makes it a point every year, the city council always vote for the lowest possible residential tax factor, which means that the residents pay the lowest amount allowed by law, even though
Yeah.
it's plenty.
And do they understand?
That's so that they can get the headline. It says that they,
Oh, really?
yeah.
What do they realize that maybe that's why they don't have companies and investors coming into the city?
And I'll tell you, the 6 years that I was on the city council, every single year, the president of the Lynn Area Chamber of Commerce would come before, or the executive editor would come before the city council and ask the city to reconsider its use of the lowest residential tax factor so that they could take some of the burden off of the businesses to hopefully attract more businesses. You should do it every year to no avail.
Didn't happen, did it?
No.
Okay.
Because businesses don't vote.
You said something the other night to me and last week, about this development that's going to have 300 market rate,
350,
private house,
yeah.
or 350 market rate. And I said to you that the owner, the company, the shell that oversees that 350 should be paying the commercial rate. And I said, I guarantee you they're not going to. And you said, you're right.
Yeah, but
I find that to be offensive.
I'm not completely sure on that.
All right. But
it is residential.
But it's a commercial enterprise. If you own apartment houses,
Right.
you shouldn't be paying residential.
But what if you have a 3-family and you live in the building? That's a multi-family.
Paul, we're talking about 350, not 3-family.
So do you draw a line at some
Of
point?
course you do.
Okay.
Most of these things are reasonable. And by the way, in the real world, I don't like a commercial tax rate that is twice that of the residential tax rate, because I think that ultimately creates a bad atmosphere for business, which is the revenue producer that would, in the long haul, keep my taxes stable.
Not to mention it creates jobs for the residents.
On top of it.
Right.
That's the bonus. So, get this, folks. Here's the option that they're going to choose. They're going to say, we're just going to reevaluate your property. And automatically, they're going to
We'll lower your rate and everything will be fine. And but everybody will pay more.
So they get enough money to pay all of these, the pay raises, the school department, everything else.
Yep.
So you know what? Nobody does anything. Revenue. Now revenue, Paul, fascinates me because people don't understand revenue. You're an accountant by profession, and you deal with a major institution that has tens of millions of dollars that you account for. Tell me about revenue flow, why it's important, and how it's distinguished that from taxes.
So there's a number of different ways that you can generate revenue for a city or a town. A city, in Lynn's case, you get the taxes, you get fees and so forth that come through, like inspectional services. There's the fines for violation of the parking rules. There's the quarters that go into the meter. You know, there's all different types of revenue, and that's just the locally generated revenue. Then you have the local aid, so you get all this money that comes from the state, and then on top of that you have potential grant dollars, block grant money that comes in from the government through community development, and you know.
So,
Number of funding
revenue can
sources.
be equated to blood. You know,
It can.
type O, type B, or whatever, right? And you can equate services or government agencies to Count Dracula, otherwise known as Vladimir the Impaler, correct? Right? So, a good, smart vampire and leech and parasite never kills the host.
Right.
because then it starves to death, right?
So are you referring to the parties that control the city as parasites?
I'm saying that Detroit got the blood sucked out of it, and that's why it was bye-bye.
Right.
And unless you are able to regenerate a food supply or a revenue supply, you have a problem.
Right.
And it's a long-standing problem. So what I'm saying is I'm looking at those successful areas and I'm saying, why is Lynn, that has this geographic advantage, a tremendous geographic advantage, why are we not booming? Beverly doesn't have a really good geographic advantage. They had an old place called United Shoe. They converted into what they call a community center. Well, booming. Peabody, who has much less land available in certain ways than we do, if we were smart enough to take some by eminent domain,
Right.
they came up with Centennial Park. How's that? How about the West End of Boston I used to go to when I was a kid? They had all those brownstones from the North End all the way up to the State House, up to Beacon Hill. Long gone. Rappaport came in, bing, 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 and they built upscale, revenue-producing property, and after that, Boston took off as a world-class city.
Huge
now, it
tax
is true that they displaced a whole bunch of people who were taxing the school system. And if the city of Lynn, folks, I know this may sound harsh to you, but you have to think about it. If you were to take a whole bunch of flatland property, Western Avenue to the coastline, to Revere, right, around the General Electric, you could do some major developments there. Hotels, market centers, the whole shooting guy. And you could say to those folks that develop, big, think big, Paul, not small, think real big. Talk about a $1.5 billion project with a huge developer like they did in Camden Park in Baltimore and places like that. Now what happens is you say to the developer, oh, by the way, you want to do this? Yeah. But don't forget to put the school down on McManus Park, on your dime. Get my point?
Yep. Linkage.
Exactly. Linkage. Paul, you make them do the infrastructure to do the ferry to Boston, right? Or connect to the highway systems and the rails. They're coming like crazy. The market space that you have in that area that you could build semi-skyscrapers would more than offset any revenue source that would ever need in the city, and it could be done quickly. Take a look at what's happening in Chelsea, I hate to tell you. What happened in Charlestown? They were not what you called garden spots.
No, they weren't.
Somerville, that's another one, right? I got my granddaughter lived in Somerville. I couldn't believe what she was paying for rent.
So let me just, I have to challenge you on
Go ahead.
the Lynn's geographic location being stellar.
Yeah.
Certainly we have the coastline, we have Lynn Woods, we have a lot of things going for us, but from a logistical point of view, we are stuck in a corner, as I like to put it. There are some challenges getting in and out of the city. It's not exactly where people want to go,
Paul,
from a business
you
perspective.
can get to Logan Airport from the city of Lynn in 15 minutes. You could accelerate that if you develop West Lynn and made a high, a fast connector to Logan Airport. Okay. What I'm saying to you is,
In the meantime, it's not geographically well situated. In fact,
of course it is, because its geography, its value is proximity to Boston. That's its value. Its value is that Boston is, in fact, land poor. And they have to expand. So when they want to come up with, Boston Scientific, and they have to go to a different place, and furthermore, why hasn't anybody realized that the city of Lynn has a community college, and we could become an educational hub also?
I think a lot of people understand that.
Yeah. Well, how come nothing's happening, Paul? If they understand it, why is
They're
it?
just they're putting a huge expansion at the school right now.
Where?
At North Shore Community
I
College.
know that, but I'm talking about why not make it a university instead of a.
Well, maybe that'll be
Two-year
the next
college.
step. But what they're doing right now, when I was talking with folks at the E-team last night, and they've got this kind of a matriculation thing where the kids that are learning at Lynn Tech, whether it's in the day school or in the night school program, they're allowing their classwork to be transferable to the school So there's, some progressive ideas about how to, get those kids getting further educated at a lower cost to them, frankly, because of the, if you get one class that you don't have to take, you could save $500, $600.
You know, Paul, you're a big fan and you're active at the Lynn Tech alumni,
Yep.
right? I go there occasionally to, substitute. I'm a real big fan of that school, Paul.
I love it there.
The kids there are terrific. The faculty's terrific. You go into the boys' room, it's clean as a whistle. The water is the same color as water's supposed to be, as opposed to these other schools I go to and I don't know what the hell's in there, right? And, toilet paper's all over the place, but not at Tech. It's amazing.
That's good,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great little school. Think big. Think big. I think we got to do that, Paul. I think we have to think about doing.
So you want to tear down all the houses in West Lynn?
I do.
Mine too?
Huh?
Mine too?
No, not you're. You're
You're gonna let me off the hook?
You're outside there. You know exactly what I'm talking about, Paul. I'm talking about you take a corridor, and by the way, Rappaport and the rest of them, they had to use dollars to replace people. This isn't like you throw them out in the street; they got no place
No,
to
I
go.
know. I get it, yeah.
You relocate them and this and that. What I'm saying is that you have a master plan, a real master plan, not the one that's never been,
Right.
activated, in which you define exactly what you're going to do. My vision is, I think you can build high rises that have corporations and medical centers and industrial like Centennial Park. That's my point. That makes sense to you? Centennial Park's doing pretty good,
Yeah.
by the way.
I feel like there's an idea going on above my head, and I just hear these bells. You hear these bells?
I do, but I'm not answering them. As hard as hearing as I am, I'm trying to make believe I don't hear it. Okay?
Yeah, so is part of this, master plan that you talk about, let's just say, and I'm still, I know it's a big idea and it's exciting from that perspective, but we still have to figure out, would it be feasible, would it be fair, and all that a lot of things that we need to figure out. So let's say that there's 200 homes that you're talking about over, like, say, from Western Ave, Commercial Street, towards Revere, right?
Okay.
That's what you're talking about, right? Basically the GE and everything around it, right?
I'm talking about from the harbor to Western Avenue.
But on the commercial streets, on the other
Yeah.
side of Commercial Street, right? That's like Ward 6,
Basically.
almost entirely.
Basically.
Right. So let's say there's 200 houses in there. Let's say that in addition there are
These aren't
Six-
small. These aren't single-family houses.
so let's say there's 400 units.
Yeah.
Because you got some singles, some twos, some threes. Let's just say that they're all twos, right? So you got 400 families that would be displaced, right? So that would be the first thing. Now, would you do it by saying that everybody, we're taking your homes, or would you, basically get somebody who would slowly start buying up the houses?
Of course, that's what you do. You don't.
So you don't really, if you don't have to
throw people
force
out of there
anybody.
without a reward. They get benefit from the value of their house, and you put set-asides in your development for the people that can go into your complexes. Do you understand that?
But I wouldn't want them to get thrown out at all. Let's say that their house is worth $300,000 and you offer them $400,000. Sure, that's a bonus to them and so forth. But I wouldn't want them to leave if they didn't want to leave. So what I would want to see is, an effort for the developer that would do this big plan that you're envisioning to kind of land bank and acquire
That
properties.
takes too much time, Paul.
Nah, it doesn't.
Paul.
You get most of it that way.
The problem is that nobody wants to deal with unintended consequences. There are always negatives to everything, and there is certainly a negative to what I'm proposing.
But it would be
But
an
is the
intended.
value, is the benefit of the city more important than the fact that some folks are going to be displaced? That's what you got to think about. It is. You remember Stalin?
He
Stalin
lived down the street from me.
He
right?
wasn't a friend of yours, but he might have been a friend of Donald Trump. The way the instead of Hitler, they might pick on Stalin, but he was a lefty. Stalin, who wiped out about 50 million people in his own right, he was a sick puppy. He had a famous quote in which he said, "The death of a child is a tragedy. The death of millions is a statistic." That's a crazy view, isn't it?
It absolutely is a crazy view, because I'll bet you those million, in that statistic, involved a lot of kids.
But the point of the matter is, if you listen to it, what in effect it means is that there's always going to be a sad story, no matter what you do. There's no way to avoid that. The question is, the viability of the city of Lynn is at hand. Without an expansion of great, latitude, right? The General Electric is a bye-bye issue. The last time I looked at about 2,000 people.
They just hired 200 more.
That's wonderful. 200, so now they're up to 2,000. They were up in 10s and 15s and 20,000s not too long ago.
No,
right?
I know. Yeah.
So the city had put all its eggs in one basket. Look what happened. You have a market basket going up. Looks like the Taj Mahal.
Yep.
How many stories is that thing?
I think it's only going to be 2.
Are you sure?
The main market, and then offices upstairs, maybe.
Did they put any satellite stores in that project?
Yes. I think the Westland Post Office is going in there.
Okay. So, the point simply being is the city must define itself. And if the city must do what it has to do to revitalize itself.
So let's go back to your theory about we got to think big, because I think you're onto something there. What that big thing is can be, what you're talking
to Boston, an adjunct to Boston, a hub.
Jamie Marsh,
Yep.
Jamie from the Community Development, once proposed creating a road that would come from. Remember the old days when you come down Route 1 from the bridge, comes down, and 95 was going to go through Lynn, and
There was
and
a guy
then
named Representative Smith that
and at
killed
the
that.
last minute it got killed, but the road was going like this, and the Marsh Road, right along the Marsh Road, was where they had built it all up.
Yeah.
So that it just stopped there, and then they just diverted everything that way, and it went on to Route 1, right?
Uh-huh.
So Route 1 is kind of turns into 95, in effect, right? What he was contemplating was extending that straight line over the Marsh Road, over by the GE, coming down on the Linway.
And?
So it would connect the Linway to points north, like
Which makes
Route
great
1.
sense.
Yeah.
And
I think that one project, while it would probably be very expensive on the order of bringing the blue line to Lynn, would probably do more for the development of an area than anything else. And if they did something like that, right, now highest and best use comes into play in areas like where the GE is and some of the properties around there. And maybe somebody like a Rappaport is going to have a vision. He's going to come in and say, you know what, I'm going to buy these properties because I can do so much more with it.
yes, and let him build the road. Why should we build the road? See, here's the whole point. The point is, when Steve Wynn put his casino in over there in Everett, he had to make concessions, for collateral expenses.
Yep.
I'm saying that's what you do.
Infrastructure, yeah.
Precisely. I mean, you have to have someone that understands that the only place that Boston can go is into Lynn. They've already eaten up Somerville. They've already eaten up Everett. They've already eaten up Charlestown and Chelsea. What's left?
Revere and Lynn, I guess, huh?
Thank you very much. And Lynn's more accessible to Boston if you look at it from that vantage point. Then you hook up the blue line or whatever you want to call it. You have the developer figure out how to do that. We have geniuses in this country, Paul.
Yep.
Well, let them use their genius. All I hear is yicky yick and yucky yak, and nothing happens.
Right.
You told me about some guy that was the youngest mayor of the city of Lynn. I must have been a puppy when he was mayor of the city of Lynn.
Tom Costin, yeah. He was
On the Linway.
He was the youngest mayor ever or something, right? Yeah.
He's been talking about the Linway as long as I can remember. Nothing's ever happened.
Well, there's a lot happening on the Linway now.
Like what?
350 unit development.
Yes, I know that, Paul. We talked about this. 350 units generates about $500,000. That's
Well, first of all, I'm gonna call you on that. It'll generate more than that, but it'll create a lot of jobs initially.
no. I'm talking about tax revenue. Forget the others, the spin-offs.
But the other stuff matters, right? So
it does.
So if this
but the most important thing
so-
we need is revenue.
right, and how about 500 plus people who are young urban professionals who opt to live in Lynn because of its proximity to Boston and its affordability. And now they live in Lynn and they actually go to Boston, make their money, and bring the money back, and they spend it in the business.
Thousands of those people that you could do, thousands, not 500, thousands, and you have community. Look at Cochran, Jennison, and Mullen. Years ago, when I was a young puppy, they built Kings Lynn. That's like a subdivision of the city of Lynn. It's almost a self-contained unit. It's almost like a gated community.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Why can't that happen again? Why can't that same principle?
But I think that's what's going to happen on the Linway.
But it hasn't. What
your-
you think and what's
why are
happened
you
are two
in-
different
Why are
stories.
you in such a hurry?
Why?
Well, look. So
Like,
let's
take a look at the color of my hair. That's why I'm in such a hurry.
All right, so we had a downturn in the economy in 2008. It's been coming back for a few years. I think a very good bellwether of good things to come. Two bellwethers. One is when a guy like Arthur Papathanasis makes a decision to invest on the Linway like he did, and he's a big part of that project on the Beacon Chevrolet site, right? So that's one thing, right? The other thing. Let me just finish my point. So the other thing is, on the night of the election, November 8th, when it started to look like Donald Trump was going to win, the stock market, the pre-markets declined by almost 800 points.
Yeah. Then what happened?
Everybody freaked out over it, but then they said, well, wait a minute. He's going to be good for business.
But why?
And now we're at all-time highs.
But why? Because more important than just him was the fact that they realized that the Senate wasn't going anywhere,
Right.
and the House of Representatives wasn't going anywhere, and they said, wow.
Right. So, and I know those points are important, but here's the point I'm trying to make, and that is between the confidence that I get when a guy like Arthur Papathanasis is looking to do big things in Lynn, and the fact that you got a guy like Charlie Patsios who's doing that development on the old Factory of the Future, and you got the old gear plant on the Linway, and all the opportunities for big things, right? And you have essentially a broader view of the market that says that no more governor on the economy. Like Obama's been a governor to the economy for 8 years. That's over. Now they're going to unleash the potential of the free markets, and I think that's going to make all the difference in the world.
Did Arthur sell the West Lynn Creamery?
I don't know, he's tired of selling milk.
My point being, if he's all ginned up about the city of Lynn, why would you sell a booming business?
Well, he was aging. Maybe his kids didn't want to take over the family business, or maybe
Okay,
it was
but now
a price he couldn't refuse.
Now he's going to make investments in the city of Lynn. See,
Look,
what I'm saying is these guys, the two people you mentioned, are fine individuals, but they're not big enough. They're piecemeal. I'm talking about big.
Right.
I'm talking about taking,
So that you were talking about the south end and the west end and so forth. The south end has been developing, right, for 40 years. Would you say? How long has it been since they first saw that as a place where they needed to revitalize it?
Well, my daughter had a business on 300 Cafe, and I think it was Summer Street, 300 Summer Street, which goes into South Boston. You talking about South Boston or the South End?
South End.
My daughter opened up her business in the South End, and she opened it up in the 90s, and she made a fortune, a restaurant
Right.
business. That was completely gentrification took place.
In the 80s,
Yep.
nobody wanted to live there. Maybe the 70s. Well, my point is, it's been 35 or 40 years of development to get it to where it's at
But
today.
they had housing stock that had character. It just had to be revitalized. We don't have that. The beautiful housing stock we have has been bastardized. Been turned into condominiums and aluminum siding and all that stuff.
Look, South Boston is closer to Boston. Somerville benefited from Cambridge dropping their, they used to have price fixing on the rentals, what they call it, rent control. And when they dropped rent control, it just kind of, everything moved into Somerville. So there's advantages to, where you are and why you are and when you are. I think this is, to your point, everything closer to Boston has already been developed, so Lynn and Revere are kind of the next logical choices, and I just think that that's going to start happening.
Let me go to a hard. Let me go to.
I guess why. Let me just say one thing,
Yeah.
one last thing, and I don't think that we can go big without leveling West Lynn. That's all. I think,
We're talking about leveling all of West Lynn.
well, but
I'm talking about taking the flat land, there's a whole bunch of it, that was formerly the General Electric, it still is the General Electric, right? And other residential areas there that fit into this nice rectangle or square lot of land
Yep.
that runs right to the harbor, and you have someone who creates a subsidy, upscale, revenue producing, okay? Now, what Lynn has an abundance of is social service agencies.
Yep.
Disproportionately high amount. Agreed?
Yep. We have a disproportionate
So
amount
we
of
have to
people
have a
in
little
need
better balance.
I agree.
I think it's, you know, we mentioned tech. One of the great, I think everybody, folks, this is really telling. I'm over at the annex at Tech, and I'm sitting there, and I'm seeing these teachers dealing with kids who have some very serious, they're like St. Jude, you know what I mean? Kids who have serious physical and health problems. And you've got to take your hat off, and you've got to fall in love with the work, the yeoman work that those folks do over at that Tech annex with these kids and giving them some quality of life.
Right.
I
Talk
mean,
about the life skills program.
unbelievable,
It's
Paul.
extraordinary, yeah.
Unbelievable, okay? Those are the good things that you can still do, and I want to do.
Yep.
I don't want those to go. However, we're at a point where we have to make little better decisions about, are we going to be soup kitchened all over the place? You know, that's
No,
all.
I've always subscribed to that theory that there needs to be a balance between the the human service side of the things and the supports, the safety net type of stuff, and the ability for a community to develop a tax base, as you said, create jobs and do all that kind of thing. Because frankly, if everybody ends up as part of the safety net, who's going to pay for it?
There would be no safety net if there's no revenue, Paul. See, that's the point.
That's my point exactly.
Yeah. So, you made a terrific point, and you've been saying it now for a while, about the drastic increase, which I think is 28%, in the school population, Lynn public school population, which is having a serious impact on the school budget, which is having a serious impact on the city budget. So you have a whole bunch of kids that we're servicing because of social and policy coming from the state and the federal government that uses Lynn as a petri dish for societal problems, right? Which is all good and well if they sent the money,
Right.
but they don't. How does Mayor Judy deal with that? How does the Lynn City Council deal with that? I mean, they're up against it too, don't get me wrong. They have to do miraculous things to keep things afloat, come to think of it.
Right. No, look, I mean, see, while I agree with you, I think the state, the federal government, and the United Nations have really over-asked in terms of what they ask of the city of Lynn. And I think that the money does come, but it comes slower than the people do. So at a minimum, it costs us in the early stages. But it also costs us to do things that, for other reasons we're really not in a position to do, i.e. build 2 more schools. I mean, frankly, we don't really have the place to put it. That's why we're now talking about putting it essentially in a residential neighborhood off of Parkland Ave and on the football field at Lynn Tech. We're doing that because we don't have any other places to do it.
We have a whole bunch of land
Where
I'm talking about, a whole bunch.
If the broader question
Yeah,
statewide was, okay, the state of Massachusetts is going to commit to an influx of immigrants, refugees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to the tune of 10,000 people. The state should be saying, okay, we got 10,000 people that we need to spread out into the 6.6 million that we already have in the state. Why don't we put them in places where there's room for them instead of jamming them all in Lynn and places?
you know the
like
answer to that, Paul. Snobbery.
Snobbery, okay. But anyway, that's just my view.
Is it not?
Nobody
wants.
bet you they didn't. There aren't a lot of them in Wellesley, and somebody was telling me the other day.
Precisely. So
was it you that told me that somebody that was somebody told me that the maybe Guatemala. There was 600 students this past year that came in from Guatemala. Came
In Lynn?
into Lynn. And one went to Swampscott. So the people in Swampscott called the city of Lynn and said, can you take this one person?
Isn't it instructive that they're building a Market Basket and not a Whole Foods in West Lynn?
It is instructive indeed.
Profiling voters, Paul. I want to have a little fun with you.
Right. So
This is an associations game.
So what you're going to say? You're going to name something, and we have to decide whether it's
You're going to decide whether that would be a Trump or a non-Trump voter, and then we can argue over it. Okay?
a Trump or a
Or a non-Trump
Clinton.
voter.
How about
Anybody but Trump. You know, in other words, left, right, liberal. Got it?
so Democrat or Republican?
Basically,
All right.
Dodge Ram pickup truck,
Trump.
Prius,
Clinton.
Subaru,
Clinton.
BMW,
Clinton.
Camaro.
Trump.
I kind of agree with that. You ready for dogs?
Practical. Let's get the practical.
Ready for the dogs?
The dogs. Okay.
Yeah. Poodle,
Clinton.
Italian Greyhound,
Trump.
Beagle,
I don't know. Anybody? Any view from the audience there?
yeah.
Beagle? Probably both Beagle-like.
Golden Retriever,
Trump.
Rescue Dog,
Trump.
Kennel, you know, pedigree,
Oh, definitely liberal.
the other guys.
Yeah, the other guys. Yeah.
How about meals?
Meals.
Yeah. Cheeseburgers,
Trump. Greasy, fat, loaded with fat. Definitely Trump.
broiled salmon,
I'm a big broiled salmon guy.
steak and potato,
Trump.
sushi. You too, huh?
Yeah, but that's more. I would say it's more
so
of a
there's a
liberal.
crossover effect there, huh? Beverages. Ready? Dunkin' Donuts coffee,
Definitely Trump.
Starbucks,
Definitely the other guys.
activities,
Activities.
bowling,
Trump.
golf,
Both.
sailing,
Definitely John Kerry types.
excuse me, Planet Fitness.
Oh yeah. We pick things up. We put things down.
What about yoga?
Clinton.
Pilates.
What's a Pilates?
It's a yoga form, something like yoga. That's like asking where Aleppo is. You know?
No, for me it isn't.
Yeah. Heroes.
Heroes.
You like this one? Gandhi.
Trump.
Really? MacArthur.
Trump.
Thatcher.
Trump.
Queen Victoria.
I don't know.
Golda Meir.
Trump.
Nelson Mandela.
Definitely.
So it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, do you think you can profile people as to which way they'll vote by doing surveys on what they like?
I think they
dogs?
do that.
Huh?
I think they do that.
They do. And you know what happened? Jared Kushner, who is his son-in-law,
Right.
micromanaged at such a point that's how he won. They so narrowed it down.
Obama did for two.
They did it better. Nobody know. They had a place in Texas, Paul. I think it was in San Antonio. They had this big, which you could have had in West Lynn. They had this big factory down there, a place. Nobody knew it was like the NSA undercover, and they were doing all of this data research and micro targeting, and nobody knew about it until it was too late. They knew Friday, before the election, that Trump was going to win.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did. They knew about Pennsylvania, and they knew about North Carolina. They knew about Ohio.
Then why were they walking all around with the long faces on election day?
Who? Those are the people not in the know. I'm talking about the.
How about Giuliani and Coulter? They were both. I mean, I listened to.
Listen, I don't speak ill about my own tribe, but Giuliani is not somebody that I.
You said he had to be on the inside, though, wasn't he?
What?
I mean, he was on the inside. He was close to the action.
There's someone said that Giuliani is slipped a little bit, between the ears. I think they're right. Yeah, I really do not want to see him Secretary of State, Paul.
Okay.
As much as I am discouraged with what
So,
Mitt Romney did.
can we talk a little bit about fake news?
Fake news?
I'm really curious about this.
Fake news?
Anybody at home understand what they mean by fake news?
Yeah, what is fake news? News that isn't?
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? I mean,
No, not really, but you-
the mainstream media is
Yeah.
basically trying to shut down all the fake news sites.
Who determines what's fake news?
They do.
So they say it's fake news?
Yeah, Drudge and, folks, I tell you about Drudge and the Breitbart news reports. Definitely good places to go to get a conservative point of view. The mainstream media and the Democrats are trying to declare them as fake news sites so that they can discredit everything that they say because people are listening to them. People are actually listening to these sites. And if they're listening to the sites, they're a threat to the progressive movement.
Paul, let me ask you a simple question. Have they ever read the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post? If you want to talk about fake news?
That's been the response from the conservative media. They're basically, I was reading an article at lunchtime about the 13 most fake news stories of all time. And they talked about who's that? I don't know, forget what his name was, but this was back in the early 30s when the New York Times reporter claimed that there was no problem with starvation in Russia, and 1.5 million people died of starvation.
Oh, yeah, in
Remember
the
that?
Ukraine, yeah.
Yeah, in the Ukraine.
Because you know why? Because they were all in love with the Russian 5-year plan.
Right, because they were in love with the whole idea of
Yeah.
communism and stuff. So they protected them, and it killed 1.5 million people, and it actually created a love affair for communism.
Let's go back to an earlier point. Earlier in the show, I brought up Stalin's name. You never hear that, do you? When you want to vilify
It's always
a
Hitler.
person on the right, it's always Hitler.
Right.
And yet Stalin made Hitler look like a choir boy almost. You get what I'm trying to say?
They were both pretty bad. Yeah.
Really bad.
Yeah.
And why not throw Mao into the mix? You know why? Because Mao and Stalin represent the totalitarian left.
Yeah, the movement that they're all about.
Exactly.
Right.
So you want to vilify, be fair about it. Mussolini, my guy, the fascist, right? I mean, the trains drained the swamps. He did drain the swamps, actually, So, who knows? You know what we said? We'll say it again, folks. The disorganized majority is always subject to the control of the organized minority.
Right.
And this is what your fake news is all about, Paul.
That's right. And so the only way we can defend against these ideas that the mainstream media says that we're all watching and listening to and reading fake news is to recognize that everyone who's saying that fake news is out there is reporting fake news. Always remember that, right? So it's like the reverse. Earlier you were talking about Detroit and how it all failed, right? And how you need to kind of feed the goose so that it can keep laying the golden eggs, right?
Go lay
It's
eggs.
called sustainability, right?
Yeah.
But look at what the progressive left does. They always talk about things in terms of sustainability. All the while, they're destroying the goose that lays the golden egg time and time again. Everything they do is backwards. It's double speak kind of thing.
You have a comment to read there. We have some comments here.
Oh, we do?
Mr. Paul, it's comment time.
Yeah, we got a lot.
And you chuckled at the first one there.
Yeah, so this is,
Politicians never die?
yeah, why don't you read that one?
Oh, you don't want me. You don't want to get in trouble. That's why. You
I'll
haven't looked how it's to say it.
I'll
That's
read
why.
it. It says, "Old politicians."
You can edit the name.
Right, yeah, so this is said, we don't have the name of the person who does it, so I don't know who said this, but this is a comment. It's on Facebook. You can read it. And it's not very becoming to somebody,
Yeah.
but it is what it is. So it says, "Old politicians never die. They just get appointed to the Water and Sewer Commission." Jesus.
Well,
After a nationwide search, they found the one person they knew it would turn the handle on the faucet, water comes out. Anyway.
voila, you're hired. Voila, right?
Yeah.
Cynical? Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the point of the matter is,
Pretty cute.
there are kernels of truth everywhere.
Yes.
By the way, and I happen to think Bob Fennell's a decent guy, so it's,
Right. Yeah, and
but-
and he's not the first one to do this, and he certainly won't be the last.
Old politicians never. That's a cop. I mean, that's a cloning of MacArthur, the guy we talked about earlier.
Right. Old generals never die.
Old soldiers never die.
Right.
They just fade, fade, fade away. So, then we have one about the commute. You see that? Why can't Lynn?
Right, have better mass transit to Boston, Salem, and Chelsea, get new commuter rail stations, and Lynn is left with an old station and crowded trains. Salem gets an express to Boston, while Lynn gets a crowded train during rush hour.
I rest my case. This is what I've been arguing the whole show. I rest my case. Lynn is left at the gate.
Why?
Yeah, why?
I mean, I would argue that at least in some extent it's because that there's no competition for elected leadership at the state level and the federal level.
We have Tommy McGee, who's a state senator, who's head of the Democratic Party. You'd think he'd have some leverage.
He's not head of the Democratic Party anymore. He gave that up. He used to be.
Smart move to give it up. It's not a nice place
Yeah,
to be.
I think it was hard for him to do both jobs.
You want to hear fake
Conflicting.
news? I'll give you fake news. This guy from Minnesota, Ellison, who they want to make the head of the Democratic Party, the Muslim, African-American guy,
Yep.
try taking a look at what he's said through the years and what he's done in associations he's had. You want to talk about Steve Bannon? You want to talk about anybody else? This guy is way...
Oh, I know. But see, that, again, it gets back to the whole progressive strategy, and that is to accuse your opponents of being everything that you are.
I like that, Paul.
And that's what they do.
You know, you're getting very profound. The last one here has to do with the ferry. We've been talking about that.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a really good point being made here was that if they had an extensive schedule, you know, and they had a good weekend and promoted a little bit, maybe it might have just worked, Paul.
Yeah. So here's what one of our listeners, our viewers, commented. Ferry was not used much during its final days. I have been told that by many. Better to use the money to get the crosstown bus back to Lynn. And then a response to that was, talking to many people, I've heard that more wanted to use it, but due to the restricted hours of the pilot program, couldn't. And he included himself in that. I'm confident if it came back and was in full operation, including full weekends, it would have more success.
I think that's a legitimate point.
Yep.
And, you know, now we're going into the winter season, so we can kiss the ferry goodbye for a while.
Well, I'll tell you, I just remember when the gambling boat used to come out of
You're talking to me about that?
So you knew about it.
I've been on it a few times.
Well, I went on it once and only once, and it was in April, and it was
But
a
did you
chilly
win?
night, and it was choppy,
Yeah.
and I don't remember whether I won or lost, but I did lose my lunch.
But the food was great.
Yeah. I don't know. I lost my lunch.
Oh, you know, you lost, you got sick?
Yes.
Oh, my God. You admit to it? Oh, your God. Folks, you're going to have to face a realization that city services, Paul, have to be paid for. There's no way around it, right? And weather and revenue is the source that we have to look for. You know, the spigot that someone talked about. There's no question that there's no will to override 2.5. The citizens wouldn't stand for it. So be on the lookout that they're going to reevaluate pretty much the housing stock, and which will increase your taxes. Right. And unless we have a think big, massive plan, not a pick here, 50 units here and 350 there, a real citywide, massive, like Centennial Park, like West End in Boston, like the Cummings Center, we're just blowing smoke. And on that, Paul, I'm going home. I'm going to take some Benadryl and some Mucinex and cuddle my dogs under a blanket. Until next week, if I make it, have a wonderful turkey day.